For the first time in my life, I was able to rewrite that script that I'd been going over and over my whole life about how dumb and lazy and ugly I was, and realize for the first time, actually, no, I'm not dumb. I'm actually very intelligent, and I've got the psychologist report there to prove it. And I'm also not lazy, because I know to achieve what I achieve, I work incredibly hard. So I was able to rewrite the script, and that had an incredibly positive impact on my self-esteem. And then when I stopped fighting against it and started working with it, life became easier.
Welcome to the Focus and Chill podcast, where we discuss unconventional productivity tactics designed for neurospicy people. I interview neurodivergent guests who've figured out secrets for getting a ton of amazing work done without burning out. I'm your host, Jeremy Nagel. I'm an ADHD software developer turned startup founder and PhD candidate. I built FocusBear to help with my own productivity and burnout challenges. Welcome to episode number 140 of the Focus and Chill podcast. I'm thrilled to be joined by Catherine Lee today. Catherine is a Queensland-based OHS and management consultant with over 30 years of experience and the founder of Lethbridge Piper Associates. She's also the founder of the Neurodiverse Safe Work Initiative, a verified social enterprise advancing neurodiversity in employment through evidence-based tools, coaching, and systems design. Her research on ADHD and workplace safety informs national and international consulting, speaking, and training. Catherine is a chartered OHS professional and coach based in Australia. Welcome to the show, Catherine.
Thank you, Jeremy. I'm delighted to be here.
Yeah, well, I was very honoured to be a guest on a webinar that you ran about 6 weeks ago. Maybe mine have been wrong, but that was a really fun experience. And I also got to meet you at the last Australasian ADHD Professionals Association conference, where you gave a riveting talk about accommodations for pilots with ADHD and how they're not equipped that well.
Yeah, that's right. That was presenting on my master's research, which was in relation to the impact of ADHD on Australian civil aviation pilots. So, it was an interesting topic. And thank you for presenting it. Your presentation was for the Neurodiversity Celebration Week. You very generously gave your time and shared your information about FocusBear, which I was delighted to share with my audience. So now it's my turn.
Yeah.
You're back.
So to kick things off, keen to hear about your own personal experience of identifying as neurodivergent. When did that point come?
It was quite a shock. I was 55 when I was officially diagnosed. So I'd gone through my whole childhood and my whole adult life until that point, just knowing I didn't fit in, really feeling like a square peg in a round hole, struggling with ridiculous things that other people seem to find easy. I remember having, lots of problems at school academically. A funny story is that my parents was called to the school when I was about 7 years old. And because I grew up in Wales, and this is in the 1970s, and we knew nothing about ADHD then, especially not in little girls. So the teachers said to my parents, "Kat's not keeping up. We don't think she's, we think there's something wrong, and we think maybe she's short-sighted." So they took me off to the optometrist, and I got my eyes tested, and sure enough, I was as blind as a bat, very, very short-sighted. And I went back to school with my little national health glasses, which I hated. And they really made no difference. The only difference, academically or in terms of my ability to focus in class, the only difference they made was that I could now see my own doodles on the page. And so, then I just told myself, well, I must, if I'm not sure, I'm sure I've got my vision corrected now. Well, I must just be not very bright. My mother, who was a school teacher, she didn't believe that I was unintelligent. She just thought I was lazy. So I took that on as well. So I went through my whole life believing I was dumb and lazy. And now with my glasses, I was ugly too. And so I carried that all around with me. But just after COVID, well, while we were in our COVID lockdown, I was doing some work with a psychologist anyway, because I'd had a long-standing history with depression and some anxiety and some trauma, and I'd lost my partner a few years before, so there was some unresolved grief around all of that. So when we went into lockdown, I thought, right, this is a good opportunity for me to do the head work I need to do now. So I was working with a psychologist, and through that process for the first time in my life, I was doing a lot of reflection and inward looking and paying attention to how I was thinking and where I was feeling things in my body and all that sort of great work that psychologists get you to do. And I realized that there were things that were going on in the way that my brain worked that couldn't be explained by trauma or depression or anxiety or grief. They were just different, and they'd always been there. But I still didn't really put two and two together. I actually started to think I maybe had early onset dementia because my working memory was so appalling. But then when we came out of the COVID lockdown, one of the first jobs I needed to do was an investigation for a client employer into an incident that had happened in a workplace where the worker had fallen and fractured his coccyx. Cutting a long story short, that fall turned out to be directly related to the fact that he had ADHD, and he'd come off his ADHD medication without medical support, without his employer knowing, because the employer had introduced a drug and alcohol screening program, which he thought he'd get busted because of his Ritalin if he, yeah. So he came off, and there's a whole lot of assumptions, made all around. But over the course of a few months, then his ADHD challenges returned, and one thing led to another, and it resulted in him having this fall. So that raised concerns for me from a professional perspective as an occupational health and safety professional, because I'd never consciously known or dealt with anyone who was neurodivergent in relation to a workplace incident before. So I went looking for information about, the safety implications of ADHD in the workplace, and I really couldn't find anything. There was lots of information, really good information for employers about, improving productivity and making adjustments, and advice for employees about whether they should disclose or not disclose, but there was nothing about safety. And so then I started looking further afield, and I discovered more about neurodiversity, and I went not even knowing that I was neurodivergent at that time. I just went into typical ADHD hyperfocus and really left no stone unturned trying to find relevant information. And there really wasn't anything. But as I read more and learned more, I started to see those traits in myself. And then I wondered whether it was a bit of confirmation bias. When you think you might like to buy a white Audi, you start seeing white Audis everywhere. So I thought, maybe I'm just reading too much about this ADHD stuff, and I'm starting to imagine that this is what I have. But I thought, no, that can't be. I'm not one of those Bart Simpson types. I'm not a naughty boy jumping around in the classroom. In fact, I was quite the opposite as a child. But the only other thing that I could explain my own thinking and functioning with was dementia, and the thought of that was terrifying. So I mentioned it to my psychologist, and she agreed that it could be ADHD, and so recommended that I go through the assessment. And I was fortunate at the time that the psychology clinic at the University of Queensland was offering ADHD testing, and so I got in quite quickly, and it was relatively cheap compared to how it is these days. And sure enough, that came back with a positive diagnosis of combined moderate to severe combined type ADHD, which, but by the time she gave me the report, I pretty much knew that's what it was. And I was relieved to think that it wasn't dementia. But at the same time, I felt a degree of shame, because ADHD is still so stigmatized, and there's so much unconscious bias. And, I'd only ever known about ADHD in the context of those disruptive, naughty boys in class. And I thought, how can it be that I have this? I'm not like that. And so I worked through that with my psychologist, and then found a very good ADHD coach, Monica Hassel, who also presented with you the other day. And she was brilliant for me in just getting my thinking straight around my own ADHD and helping me develop, greater insight into why I am the way I am, but also to crystallize my vision for the Neurodiverse Safe Work Initiative. And I think the impact that the diagnosis, and I started taking stimulant medication as well, which was life-changing for me. But I think the greatest impact that it had was on my own opinion of myself. For the first time in my life, I was able to rewrite that script that I'd been going over and over my whole life about how dumb and lazy and ugly I was,
Mm.
and realize for the first time, actually, no, I'm not dumb. I'm actually very intelligent, and I've got the psychologist report there to prove it. And I'm also not lazy, because I know to achieve what I achieve, I work incredibly hard, probably harder than neurotypical people, just to get things done. So I was able to rewrite the script, and that had an incredibly positive impact on my self-esteem. And then when I stopped fighting against it and started working with it, life became easier. And at the same time, what I realized as I was realizing this for myself personally, I also realized there's a huge gap in my knowledge as a professional, but not just me as a professional, as the whole, profession of occupational health and safety. In all of the studies that I've done, in all of the papers I've read, there's been nothing about the impacts of neurodivergent functioning in the workplace. And what I realize is most employers design their health and safety systems with the assumption that most people think and function in roughly the same way. And by doing so, they design systems that just don't manage risk, and in some cases may even introduce new risk or increase risks for people who think and function and learn and communicate and regulate attention and emotion and perceive and respond to risk differently from others. And so that's really what inspired the Neurodiverse Safe Work Initiative.
It's wonderful to hear about your own reframing of the challenges from the past and the inner narrative, and how that's now translating to helping other people. Because it does
Yeah.
seem like a huge gap. I remember at one of the previous ADPIC conferences, there was a speaker talking about the rate of accidental injury and death in ADHD
Yeah.
teenagers and adults. But they were mainly talking about road accidents and
Yeah.
falling off a scooter and things like that. But workplace injury, I see how that could be a major problem.
Exactly. Exactly. And I find it quite shocking that there's research that's shown that the combined effect of all the increased risk factors for individuals with unmanaged and unrecognized ADHD, they have a life expectancy 11 to 13 years shorter than
Mm,
people without ADHD or people with well-managed ADHD. And I just find that incredibly shocking. And so it's something that employers should be concerned with.
yeah,
Mm.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Mm. And that transitions well into the next question, which is around your work. And we heard a little bit about it in the bio, but could you talk about how you divide your time between the Neurodiverse Safe Work Initiative and
Yeah.
your OHS work and your
Yeah.
research as well?
Yeah. Well, I haven't started the research yet. So my master's is finished. I've been taking a little bit of a break, but I am contemplating starting a PhD as well. But so yes, so you're quite right. I have the two businesses. So Lethbridge Piper Associates is my occupational health and safety management consultancy, and that's just a standard health and safety consultancy. I work with senior leadership and boards doing management systems audit and complex investigations, designing management systems, managing complex rehabilitation cases, regulator reviews, all those sorts of things. So that's my day job, I should say. I try and split it. I try and split my days about 2.5 days on each. Doesn't always work like that though. And it's hard for me to look at my work in occupational health and safety as I used to without having a neurodiverse lens cast over it now. So when I'm auditing an employer's management systems now, I'm always looking for how inclusive that system is. Are there policies and procedures accessible in multimedia forms, or are they all just printed policies that somebody has to sit and read in their lunch break? Because if that's the case, well, someone with ADHD or dyslexia is not going to go too well reading those essential safety documents, right? So
Mm,
I always do those management systems audit through a neurodiverse lens. So the Neurodiverse Safe Work Initiative is, as you say, a social enterprise. So it was really important for me as I was setting that up to feel that I was doing something to serve my neurodivergent tribe. And so the Neurodiverse Safe Work Initiative mostly works with employers, again, at that strategic executive level. And our mission really is to motivate, empower, and support employers with education and tools and resources to help them design work systems and a workplace culture that is safe and inclusive for the neurodiverse workforce. And I use the term neurodiverse to include neurodivergent and neurotypical workers. Because invariably, if you design a system that's safe for neurodivergent workers, it will also be safe for neurotypical workers. It'll benefit everyone. And it's exactly the same philosophy that I had going into occupational health and safety. I'm concerned for the well-being and the safety of the worker, but there's only so much a worker can do to control their own environment in the workplace. So whether we're talking about neurodivergent workers or neurotypical workers, there's only so much they can do to keep themselves safe. Of course, they have to not take stupid risks. Of course, they have to comply with the company's safety policies and procedures and report hazards and all of that. But they're not responsible for controlling the culture or designing the system. That responsibility rests with the employer. And so the way I can have the greatest impact on the safety outcomes of all workers, neurodivergent or neurotypical, is by influencing the leadership. So I work with the leadership to help them and support them, to educate them, to design systems that are safe for from a broader cross section, like the broader workforce, not just the neurotypical workforce. But I also do work with neurotypical individuals. So as you mentioned, I am a professional coach. I'm not an ADHD coach. I don't have that level of certification yet, although maybe one day that'll come. But what I am is a professionally trained coach. I'm a member of the International Coaching Federation with lived experience of neurodivergence. And so I work with adults who come to me because they found me online and they're struggling with some aspect of their neurodivergence in the context of their work. And so I coach, and a tool that I use is called the Neurodiversity Workplace Profiler, which was designed by Professor Amanda Kirby in the UK, who's one of the world's leading authorities on neurodiversity. And based on her research, what we know about neurodivergent individuals is that most people who are neurodivergent have more than one type. So, for example, a person may be both autistic and have ADHD, like you, or a person may have ADHD and dyscalculia, like me, or someone may have ADHD and dyspraxia and dysgraphia, or any combination of the different types of neurodivergence combined with sometimes quite commonly mental health challenges as well. So it's very difficult from a diagnostic perspective to just nail one thing and treat one thing. And also for the individual in terms of managing themselves, if you only focus on the ADHD, you potentially miss all the other stuff that's going on. So Amanda designed the Neurodiversity Workplace Profiler it's not a diagnostic tool, but it's more of a screening, like a profiling tool, a bit like a Myers-Briggs, if you've ever gone through anything like that. So it's online and the individual goes through a number of modules and answers a whole heap of questions. And then a number of reports are generated by the profiler that basically maps out the individual's own unique neurodivergent profile, and then draws out from that what are their key strengths that come along with their neurodivergent profile, and then what are also the challenges that are there because of their neurodivergence and will always be there because it's just the way their brain is wired. And then in coaching, we try and work with the strengths to try and capitalize on those strengths, and wherever we can, use those strengths to scaffold and support the challenge areas. So I coach people using that profiler, and they go through that. I mean, they don't have to. I can coach people without it, but I do find that the profiler just gives people that extra level of insight that perhaps they don't have with just a pure, ADHD diagnosis. And sometimes employers refer their workers to me as well for coaching with the profiler if they have a worker that's asked for adjustments, or they may only recently have been diagnosed and they know they're struggling at work, but they just don't know what they need, and the employer doesn't know what they need, or they can't articulate it. And so we can tease that out in coaching. And one of the profiler reports is called the Work With Me Passport, which also brings out some of those adjustments that might work given this person's unique makeup. So I do that coaching. And yes, basically I work with, as I said, employers at that strategic leadership level, but also neurodivergent workers. And I find that, it's very rewarding work. I feel my work health and safety work is rewarding too in different ways, but my neurodiversity work, I feel I feel like I really make a difference in the lives of other neurodivergent people. And if I can do something to help relieve their suffering and their anxiety about whatever their work situation is, then, I can go to bed and have a good night's sleep knowing that I've helped someone that day.
Yeah,
Mm.
that's a nice way to to end the day,
Yeah, yeah,
feeling that
absolutely. Yeah.
satisfaction.
Mm.
And yeah, the work you're doing sounds amazing. I'm gonna look at the neurodiversity workplace
Ah,
profiler myself as well.
okay, no
Sounds like it
worries.
would be helpful as a self-awareness
Yeah,
tool because I've done elements of that. I find user manual for me really helpful as a way of communicating my communication preferences and
right,
my
right.
needs to other people. It sounds like that. What was it? The workplace passport or
The work with me passport.
work with me passport?
Yeah, yeah,
Is it a similar idea that you share that passport with other people so they?
yeah. So with the coaching packages that we have available on the website, they're there for individuals that want to engage me directly without going through their employer. And so they get those reports, they own those reports, they can do whatever they like with those reports. I don't release those reports to their employer or anyone without their consent. So it's
Mm,
important for the individual to know when they work with me that it is whatever they tell me is confidential. And then sometimes they take the report if this neurodiversity screener reports shows that they have traits of, say, autism and developmental language disorder, where they knew they had ADHD, but they didn't know they had traits of the others, they
mm,
may then want to pursue with that diagnosis further and go and have a chat with their doctor. Or sometimes, certainly the work with me passport can, it doesn't give you all the answers, but it can help open the dialogue with the employer. If they want to take that report. And you see, the other problem is, Jeremy, it's very difficult in Australia as an adult to be diagnosed with
mm,
ADHD or autism. It's simply inaccessible for most adults, given the scarcity of medical professionals qualified to diagnose ADHD and autism in adults, and the costs involved and the wait times. It's simply inaccessible for most neurodivergent adults. And so it's a fact that there's actually been research back in 2018 that showed in Australia only 1 out of every 10 adults in Australia with ADHD has been diagnosed. Now,
mm,
admittedly, that was back in 2018, and awareness has increased since then, and it may be that proportion has changed. But that still means that there's a substantial number of people walking around in the community that have ADHD that don't know why they are the way they are. They maybe
mm,
suspect they have ADHD, but they've got no chance of ever getting diagnosed because they can't afford it, or they're
mm,
living in remote and rural Australia, and there just isn't anyone out there. And so what happens though, Jeremy, is when people go and speak to their employer and say, look, I think I've got ADHD and I'm struggling with this aspect of my job, and I'm wondering if I can have a little bit of flexibility around my hours or whatever it is, usually the first thing the employer says is, well, if you're requesting an adjustment on disability grounds, we need to have proof.
mm,
We need a letter from your doctor or a medical certificate. So what the employer is asking for is the very thing the individual can't produce. Now,
mm,
think about it. That's an inherently discriminatory practice. And if you think about that further, if you take that one step further, if a member of the LGBTQI plus community approaches HR and asks for carers leave or bereavement leave because they've lost or they need to care for their same-sex partner, HR doesn't ask them to prove their sexuality.
mm,
Or if a member of First Nations community asks for cultural leave, HR doesn't ask them for proof of their cultural identity. So why does the employer ask for proof of their neurodiverse identity when the very proof that they're asking for may be inaccessible to the individual?
mm,
But oops, but on the other side though, a lot of times employers are well intentioned and they don't want to risk doing anything that might make the person's circumstances worse.
mm,
So often employers are saying, oh, I know you're asking for this, but like, how do I know that's going to help you? How do I know it's not going to make things worse? Can't we just get something from your doctor to confirm? Because, they're worried about the liability side of it. And I get that completely. The Human Rights Commission cautions employers against doing that. It's actually recommended that if the person can't produce the diagnosis, make the adjustments anyway and just see, it may help. It may not, but do it. Like, you just try. Where I think the neurodiversity workplace profiler reports fill a gap is in that information lack, that information gap. So if the person doesn't have a diagnosis, then the employer is entitled to ask for information and medical information. What do you do if the worker can't provide it? Maybe the neurodiversity workplace profile will fill that gap, because although it's not diagnostic, the employer doesn't need a diagnosis. The screener report shows that the individual has maybe multiple traits, many traits of ADHD, or several traits of ADHD, and some traits of dyslexia, and some traits of autism. But most importantly, it illustrates how that affects the individual's functioning. And that's really all the employer needs to know. I always say to employers when they ask me, oh, I think there's someone in my team that might have ADHD. How do I broach that subject with them? What I usually say to them is, why do you need to broach the subject with them in the first place? Like, why don't focus on the label? Because labels can be misleading. Because one ADHD person doesn't function like another. And you probably heard the expression, if you've met one autistic person, you've met one autistic person. Everyone's different. So we think we know what ADHD means, and we think that, oh, well, because the last person asked for noise-induced hearing, asked for noise-cancelling headphones, then this person's going to need noise-cancelling headphones. For me, noise-cancelling headphones is the worst thing. Because my ruminations are internal. So if I'm not hearing noises outside me, I'm focusing more on what's going on in my brain. So it's very personal. And this is one of the things that Amanda says in her research and through the profiler is focus on person-centered solutions, not label-led solutions. Right. So that's what I encourage employers to do. Ditch the labels and focus on the functioning. And focus on what the person does well, and how can you create an environment where those skills and talents can show up consistently in work. And focus less on what they can't do and more on what they can do and they can do well.
That's a really great lens of looking at it. Take away from the deficit mindset.
Yeah, exactly.
More strengths-based. Yeah, that's fascinating. And I'll ask a few more questions when we get to the part about how you optimize your work environment. But before we go there, keen to hear about when you're not working on the two businesses and maybe doing research on the side, what are your hobbies? What do you enjoy getting up to?
Goodness. Well, I got married again in 2024, which was wonderful.
Congratulations.
I met a wonderful, profoundly neurodivergent man who's never been diagnosed, but we just click and we just get each other because we understand each other's just the way we are, and just accepting each other the way we are. And so we now have this wonderful blended family with 5 kids between us and 2 grandchildren and another one on the way. So a lot of our time is filled up with family. Exercise is really important to me. I mean, I have to confess, it's not because I love it. My natural inclination is to be a bit of a couch potato, but I know I must exercise both for my physical and my mental health. So that's a not negotiable for me now. I get up every morning and I do Pilates 6 days a week and follow it up with a long walk. And I can't start my day until I've done that. And I find that just helps set my day up. So exercise is important. And then other things, I'm a big fan of family history research. And if I find myself with some free time on a Sunday afternoon, I can find myself hyper-focusing on ancestry.com, trying to find some interesting stories about some long lost ancestor. But it's interesting looking at that through a neurodiverse lens as well. When I read about some of my ancestors, and some of them were rascals, and some of them made it into the media, and some of them were, politicians and whatever. So I've got a real mixed bag of in my gene pool. But I look at some of them now and I think, why did you behave the way you did? You sound very neurodivergent to me. I watched, obviously there was no diagnoses in those days, but I had one of my ancestors died in childhood at the age of 9, and the description of him made me think that he must have been profoundly autistic and nonverbal. But they didn't know anything like that in 1865, obviously. This is the point. Neurodiversity has been there. Like it's been there for as long as humans have been here. This is just the diversity of thought and the diversity of the brain's function. It's always been there. It's not just emerged in the last 40 years since we've been able to diagnose ADHD. ADHD was first mentioned in the medical literature in about 1765 or something. but it's been around in humanity for as long as humans have existed. And I think that's something that we forget. And that's what I appreciate when I do my family history research. I find it interesting seeing these traits popping up in other ancestors.
Yeah, or the hyperactive ancestors who
Yeah.
sailed across the seas and
Yeah,
weren't willing to take risks.
or those high achievers that you just look at what they've done in their life and you think, how did you get all of that done? You must have had ADHD.
Yeah, driven as if by a motor.
Exactly, exactly.
Okay, so then going back to getting all those things done, what do you find personally helps you in terms of setting up your work environment? You said headphones don't help. That
No, not for me, they don't. I do sometimes when I really need to focus deeply, I just need silence. And I'm fortunate here. I have my home office set up and it's very quiet here. We're near the ocean. If I open my back doors, I can hear the sea, which sometimes helps. So for me, I think it's about structure. And as I mentioned, I getting up in early 6 o'clock in the morning, going to a 7 o'clock Pilates class, going for a long walk afterwards. That's a not negotiable. I have to do that. And then the next thing I do usually, I tend to plan my day and plan my week. I use various tools and I use Focus Bear as well. Thank you very much. But I tend to start the day by looking at everything that I've got on my to-do list. And one of the things I say to myself is if everything is important, nothing is important. So I have to choose what are the two or three big things I must achieve today or the world's going to end. Like there's a deadline on something. I've promised an employer I'm on a deadline to get a submission in or something. It's got to be finished today. So that goes at the top of the list. But then another thing I do, which I found quite helpful, is finding all of those little bits and pieces of things that have to be done. Like I've got to book that doctor's appointment or that dentist appointment, or I've got to pay that bill, or I've got to contact somebody or other because I've overpaid this bill, or I've, got to book the dog into the vet. All those little things that are the rest of our lives that don't get done because we're stuck in hyperfocus. So I put those on the list as well. And then I start a timer, 20 minutes. And I call those little bits and pieces the low hanging fruit. And I make a little bit of a competition for myself to knock off as much of the low hanging fruit as I can in that 20 minutes. And on Microsoft To Do, every time you tick something off, it goes, ta-da! So you get that little woo, dopamine squirt. I've done something. I've achieved that. Right, now on to the next one. And I go through as many as I can. And then when that alarm goes off, I finish the last piece of low-hanging fruit. And then I take a break for 5 minutes. And then I come back and tackle my first big job. And I find that little routine of exercise in the morning and then ticking off some of the low-hanging fruit, it's enough it stimulates enough dopamine in me to motivate me to do that, to be able to focus on the first big job. But then I also set timers on that because again, hyperfocus is a problem and losing track of time is a problem. I have this weird thing where, and it sometimes trips me up in the morning between 6 o'clock when I get up and 7 o'clock when I go to Pilates, where for me, because we know, and Monica talked about this in our webinar that we did the other week, we have this fractured relationship with time. We have two time zones. There's either now or not now. For me, how that shows up is that I'm completely oblivious to the passage of time. So the last time I looked at my watch, when I get up in the morning, I look at my watch at 6 o'clock in the morning. And then it's always 6 o'clock in the morning until the next time I look at my watch. And so I think, oh, it's only 6 o'clock in the morning. So I've got time to run around the house and do all these domestics and do the washing and put something on the line and empty the dishwasher and there's this squeaky lock on this door. And then I start trying to fix the lock on the door. And before I know it, it's 7:10 and I've missed Pilates,
oh.
right? Because I didn't look at my watch. So because I'm unaware of the passage of time. So I have to then set the alarms. I can't live without my Apple Watch. So I have an alarm set. I've got to go. The alarm goes off at 6:50. I've got to stop whatever I'm doing and get out the door because I can walk to Pilates. So that I find in the work context, if I'm working on a particular task. Say I'm writing a proposal for a client, or I'm preparing to speak at a conference and I'm writing the paper, and it's something I'm really enjoying and I'm doing some research. Again, I get stuck in hyperfocus and lose track of time. And before I know it, it's 6 o'clock and my husband's coming through the door and it's dark. And I think, where did the last 6 hours go? I haven't even had lunch and I'm still wearing my gym gear. So again, I have to set an alarm, at an hour. Take an alarm goes off, I take a 5-minute break and I'll go and change, because it's not good to focus on the screen all the time. So I'll go outside and look at the horizon, look at the ocean, make a cup of coffee, have a drink of water, make a quick phone call or whatever. And then I come back and do another hour. Oh, bless you.
Oh, thank you.
Do another hour of deep focus. And then I take a good break for about half an hour. And then I come back and tackle more low hanging fruit. And I try to, the other thing I try to do as well is the way my energy, I think working for yourself, it doesn't work for everyone. I think for a lot of neurodivergent people, it works really well because we can set our day up around those natural peaks and troughs in our energy and our ability to focus. And so I focus best in the morning after I've exercised. I find I can get my best work done in the morning, but then I need a good break in the middle of the day when I'm just failing. I need some rest, or not even, I need some rest from the brain work. So I might do something physical. So that's when I might run around the house and do some domestics, or go over to the shops and pick up some groceries or whatever, and have some lunch, and then come back and then tackle some more low-hanging fruit in the afternoon, and another stint of focus in the afternoon, later in the afternoon. And I always try and finish, around 5 if I can, so that I've got some time in the evening to switch off and see the kids or spend some time with my husband or whatever. So yeah, I think it's tempting when you work for yourself and you love what you do to just work and work and work and work and work. And but then I think when you do that, you burn yourself out and you lose the pleasure of it, because then it becomes a chore and you start to resent it, and your family start to resent it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I can relate.
Yeah.
You said something as well that I think is really important around breaking up the hyperfocus with breaks. And I'm so inspired by it that we're going to take a break now. The Focus and Chill podcast is brought to you by Focus Bear, a focus enhancement app for ADHDers. Staying on top of tasks is easier than ever with Focus Bear's new To-Dos feature. Record a voice note describing what you need to do, and Focus Bear's AI will turn it into a structured set of subtasks and automatically prioritize it for you. You can also take a photo of the paper to-do list and the AI will work its magic. I'd love for you to try it. You can jump onto focusbear.io or just Google Focus Bear and try it out. Let me know what you think. Okay, we have satisfied our OHS requirements by taking a break and looked after our eyes.
Yes, I've done a little stretch.
Yeah. I've gone and checked to find out why my son was crying. It turned out he ate some kiwi fruit and it was so sour that he cried.
Oh no, oh bless.
So I'm keen to hear now about how your sleep is and how you wind down in the evening. You said you finish work at 5 and then you've got some time to wind down. What do you get up to?
Look, I really enjoy cooking. And I am a good cook. I was raised to cook. I learned to cook as a child, and I've always loved that creative process around food and healthy, nutritious food. And I think, look, a healthy diet is important for everyone, but particularly for people, neurodivergent people, we know there are certain foods that are better for us than others. So I try and cook really healthy, nutritious food, not a lot of processed stuff, not a lot of salt, not a lot of sugar, lots of flavor, lots of fresh ingredients. So I do love cooking. And as I said, we have this wonderful blended family now. So when my husband and I first got together and we were bringing the kids together, they're all young adults now. I started this tradition of a family dinner. It used to be once a week, but we're all very busy. So now it's usually about once a fortnight, and everybody comes here about once a fortnight or once a month for a big family dinner on the back deck. And there's about 15 of us, and I love cooking for them all, especially when the grandchildren come and we get, granny cuddles and get to play on the floor with all the toys from Granny's cupboard. So we love that. So I love cooking. Sometimes though, at the end of the day, if I've had a long day and I just can't focus my head around preparing a meal, My husband will come home from work and I'll just say, I'm just too tired, and we'll go out and we'll have dinner out somewhere nice. We like going to see movies. I don't sit and watch a lot of TV because I find it very difficult to sit still. And also because I think my work, although I work at a standing desk, my work is quite sedentary. I do a lot of work at my desk. And so the last thing I want to do is sit down in front of the TV. I feel the need to move my body in the evening. So whilst my husband's the opposite, he's on his feet all over the place all day, very physically active in his job. So he just wants to come and lie down at the end of the day. And so but I need to move. But I just busy myself around the house. So once I've cooked a meal and cleaned up, I might do a bit of ironing or whatever. I'll just something to move my body. I might talk to friends on the phone. So weekday evenings are pretty chill. We always try and make a point, my husband and I, of having date night on Saturday night. So we're fortunate that we don't have young kids to find babysitters for anymore, and we don't have any pets at home anymore, so we don't have to worry about leaving them. So we always try and do something different on a Saturday night, whether it's going to the theatre, trying out a new restaurant, going for a drive at sunset or whatever. I think it's really important, in your relationship, that you find some time to keep that connection between the two of you and forget about the troubles of the day. And just focus on each other again. So so that's usually Saturday night date night for us.
Oh, beautiful. I'm looking forward to being able to resume that once our son is a bit older. He's 8 months, and Saturday nights are
It's
looking
hard.
after him, but
It's
when he
hard.
gets older.
Yeah.
Good. That sounds lovely. So people would like to connect with you for coaching or to find out more about the Neurodiverse Safe Work Initiative or OHS.
Of course.
Where could they connect with you online?
So for coaching, if they want to know anything about neurodiversity and my work with the Neurodiverse Safe Work Initiative, obviously it's our website, the Neurodiverse Safe Work Initiative. If you want to know anything about my work in occupational health and safety generally, then there's a website for that too, Lethbridge Piper Associates. I'm also on LinkedIn. So that's probably, if people are on LinkedIn and they want to connect with me there, then that's fine as well. So yeah, any of those is fine. And on both of the websites, if somebody wants to book in for a complimentary 30-minute consultation, they're not sure whether they think they might like some coaching with me, but they want to check me out first, that's completely fine. Or they've got some questions about the profiler. We've actually got a webinar up on the website. When we launched, because I'm very proud to bring the Neurodiversity Workplace Profiler into Australia from the UK and adapted it to the Australian business context. And so when we launched it here in Australia in 2023, we did a webinar where Amanda Kirby was my special guest, and she was speaking about the profiler. So there's a webinar there. If people want to know more about the Neurodiversity Workplace Profiler on my coaching, that's all online, but you can book in a complimentary 30-minute session if you just want to check me out.
Wonderful. Well, it's been fantastic having you once. Thanks so much for sharing all of your wisdom and it's making me think about workplace risks in a different way.
Yeah, thank you. Well, thank you for the opportunity, and it's been great to chat with you.
Likewise. We'll wrap the show with that.
Thanks, Jeremy.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of the Focus and Chill podcast. To listen to other episodes, jump onto podcast.focusbear.io. If you'd like to be a guest on the show or you know someone who'd be a good fit, email us at team@focusbear.io. Otherwise, stay focused, stay chilled, and peace out.